15 Hollywood stars that are unrecognizable. Today, what happens when the relentless, unforgiving mirror of Hollywood completely erases the iconic faces we once worshipped? We are heavily conditioned to believe that global superstardom guarantees eternal beauty and absolute, untouchable perfection. But behind the blinding flashes of the paparazzi, a terrifying, deeply tragic reality is silently unfolding. Today, we are violently pulling back the glittering curtain to expose the most jaw-dropping, entirely unrecognizable physical transformations in modern cinematic history. From breathtaking leading ladies whose famous features were decimated by desperate, botched surgeries, to untouchable heartthrobs utterly ravaged by devastating invisible illnesses. You will not believe the agonizing secrets behind their altered reflections. Before we uncover these heavily guarded Hollywood tragedies, smash that subscribe button, drop a comment below, and welcome back to American Icon Stories. Madonna. When you trace the absolute zenith of pop culture and continuous artistic reinvention, Madonna is the undisputed, immortal queen. For over 4 decades, she effortlessly dictated global trends, constantly shedding her skin to introduce groundbreaking eras of music and fashion. She was the ultimate cinematic chameleon, holding the entire world captive with every single aesthetic shift. However, the 67-year-old icon has recently become the absolute epicenter of a fierce, highly polarizing, and deeply intense global debate regarding her drastically altered appearance. The profound shockwave truly hit critical mass during her highly televised appearance at the 2023 Grammy Awards. The internet completely exploded as audiences were met with an incredibly jarring, unexpectedly altered visage. Fans and relentless media outlets immediately pointed to what appeared to be heavy, aggressive cosmetic interventions, intense fillers, and a seemingly desperate surgical crusade to artificially freeze the unforgiving hands of time. The visionary artist who once flawlessly defined global beauty standards was suddenly, ruthlessly labeled as entirely unrecognizable, prompting a morbid public fascination with her intensely transformed, heavily augmented features. Yet behind the staggering headlines and the vicious tabloid frenzy, a profoundly complex, deeply emotional narrative is unfolding. Instead of retreating into the shadows, Madonna fiercely fired back at the blinding glare of the spotlight. She powerfully condemned the toxic, suffocating double standards of ageism and misogyny that aggressively target aging women in the entertainment industry. She absolutely refuses to apologize for her physical choices or quietly conform to an outdated, traditional blueprint of how a woman in her late 60s should exist. Her striking, highly debated physical metamorphosis serves as a magnificent, staggering testament to the crushing weight of Hollywood beauty standards, proving that even the most fearless, untouchable pop royalty is forced into a grueling, highly public battlefield against the relentless mirror of time. Meg Ryan. If you rewind the cinematic timeline to the height of the 1990s, Meg Ryan was the undisputed luminous queen of the silver screen. With a signature, effortlessly chic, blonde bob, and an infectious, crinkly-eyed smile, she perfectly embodied the quintessential American girl next door. She dominated the global box office in beloved timeless classics, generating billions and establishing a seemingly invincible multi-million-dollar cinematic empire. She was the ultimate romantic lead, captivating audiences through the lens of every major Hollywood director. However, as the unforgiving narrative of time progressed, the 64-year-old superstar found herself trapped in a deeply tragic heavily scrutinized visual metamorphosis. When she stepped back onto the highly televised red carpets after a long, deliberate hiatus, the public reaction was one of absolute, paralyzing shock. The soft, expressive features that once naturally lit up high-definition frames appeared drastically, almost jarringly altered. Paparazzi flashes and aggressive tabloid speculation highlighted an unnaturally taut complexion and heavily refined facial contours, immediately sparking a wildfire of cosmetic surgery rumors. Critics viciously labeled her appearance as the result of a botched, desperate attempt to surgically freeze her youthful prime. The industry that once adored her natural charm suddenly turned its hypercritical, deeply unforgiving focus on her perceived physical flaws. Yet the true, deeply compelling climax of her story is her fierce, unapologetic resilience. Instead of crumbling under the crushing weight of global scrutiny, Ryan has gracefully reclaimed her own narrative. She firmly dismisses the toxic, superficial noise of the media, boldly declaring her profound appreciation for the wisdom that accompanies aging. Meg Ryan stands today not as a tragic victim of Hollywood's impossible beauty standards, but as a magnificently strong, profoundly complex survivor. Her breathtaking journey powerfully illustrates that true, enduring elegance is never defined by a flawlessly smooth surface, but by the unyielding confidence to simply live authentically in front of the world. Val Kilmer. When you envision the ultimate, fiercely charismatic leading man of the late 20th century, Val Kilmer was an absolute, untouchable cinematic titan. From soaring through the skies as the fiercely competitive Iceman in Top Gun, to brooding in the shadows as the legendary caped crusader in Batman Forever, he possessed a breathtaking, rugged magnetism. He commanded every single frame he inhabited, projecting an aura of pure, invincible Hollywood stardom. However, the 66-year-old actor's magnificent, action-packed narrative took a profoundly heartbreaking, agonizingly real detour, transforming him in ways no audience could have ever anticipated. The first signs of a drastic, deeply concerning metamorphosis began to surface with highly publicized, extreme weight fluctuations, eventually culminating in a shocking, skeletal appearance that left fans in absolute disbelief. The devastating, heavily guarded truth finally shattered the silence in 2017. Kilmer was locked in a brutal, life-or-death battle with severe throat cancer. The excruciating, grueling reality of his medical treatments, enduring intense radiation, aggressive chemotherapy, and a life-altering tracheostomy exacted an incredibly severe physical toll. His once striking, perfectly chiseled leading man features were heavily weathered by the monumental fight for survival, and his famously smooth, commanding voice was tragically, permanently silenced, requiring him to physically plug his throat just to speak. Yet the most spectacular, awe-inspiring chapter of his legacy is his absolute refusal to be erased by tragedy. Stripped of his traditional Hollywood armor, he bravely stepped back into the blinding spotlight, delivering a profoundly emotional, tear-inducing return to the silver screen that proved his artistic brilliance remains completely intact. Val Kilmer's breathtaking physical transformation is not a story of a fallen idol, but rather a magnificent, raw testament to absolute human endurance. He stands today as a deeply scarred, incredibly inspiring warrior, powerfully demonstrating that the most captivating heroes are not the ones with flawless features, but the ones who bravely display the undeniable, hard-won battle scars of survival. Mickey Rourke. When you picture the absolute smoldering epicenter of 1980s Hollywood rebellion, Mickey Rourke was the undisputed, untamed bad boy. With his ruggedly handsome, brooding features and timeless, highly stylized classics like 9.5 Weeks, he possessed a raw, electrifying magnetism that completely captivated global audiences. He was the ultimate untouchable cinematic tough guy. However, the 73-year-old actor's magnificent trajectory took an incredibly violent, jaw-dropping detour when he abruptly walked away from the glittering silver screen to step into the brutal, blood-soaked reality of the professional boxing ring. The punishing, relentless physical toll of the sport completely shattered his famous, highly bankable visage. Suffering multiple broken noses and severe, deeply fractured cheekbones, Rourke was forced into a desperate, agonizing labyrinth of facial reconstructive surgeries. But the true, deeply tragic turning point occurred when he famously confessed to seeking out the absolute wrong surgeon to piece his shattered features back together. The catastrophic, highly visible results of these botched procedures left fans in complete, paralyzing shock. His once sharply defined heartthrob features melted into a heavily swollen, entirely unrecognizable mask, violently erasing the iconic face that originally built his cinematic empire. Yet the most breathtaking chapter of his chaotic, highly scrutinized life is his spectacular, undeniable artistic resurrection. Instead of permanently hiding in the shadows of his botched surgeries, he fiercely channeled his immense, deeply personal pain and physical scars into profoundly raw, highly acclaimed cinematic performances. Mickey Rourke stands today as a magnificent, deeply complex survivor of his own destructive choices. He powerfully proves that while the brutal combination of the boxing ring and misguided surgical scalpels can completely destroy a Hollywood facade, absolute, undeniable artistic brilliance can never be permanently erased. Renée Zellweger. If you examine the absolute peak of modern romantic comedies, Renée Zellweger was universally adored as the ultimate, effortlessly relatable girl next door. Through her iconic, deeply sincere performances in massive global hits like Jerry Maguire and Bridget Jones's Diary, she possessed an incredibly endearing, perfectly imperfect charm. She famously, fearlessly fluctuated her weight and entirely transformed her physique for her art, proving her absolute, unwavering dedication to authentic storytelling. However, the 57-year-old Academy Award winner eventually found herself trapped in the blinding, highly toxic crosshairs of Hollywood's most vicious, hypercritical scrutiny regarding the natural female aging process. The pristine illusion of her quiet, hard-earned hiatus was violently shattered during a highly publicized, deeply analyzed red carpet appearance in 2014. The international media completely erupted in an unprecedented, deeply invasive firestorm. Her previously recognizable, famously expressive features appeared noticeably, strikingly altered, sparking a relentless, aggressive tidal wave of cosmetic surgery speculation. The brutal, unforgiving tabloid culture ruthlessly dissected every single inch of her face, wildly debating whether the startling change was the natural evolution of age or the result of a desperate surgical intervention. The very industry that once heavily profited from her unique beauty abruptly subjected her to a terrifying, highly public visual trial. Instead of crumbling under the crushing, suffocating weight of the global backlash, Zellweger mounted a fiercely elegant, absolutely triumphant counterattack. She firmly dismissed the incredibly superficial noise, powerfully attributing her altered appearance to a profoundly peaceful, healthy, and completely fulfilled personal life away from the cameras. She then spectacularly silenced her harshest critics by returning to the screen and capturing yet another prestigious Academy Award. Renée Zellweger stands today as a magnificent, unbroken titan of cinema, Her breathtaking journey serves as a staggering, powerful indictment of Hollywood's impossible, deeply hypocritical beauty standards, proving that true, monumental talent will always outshine the shallow lens of the paparazzi. Jonah Hill. When you think of the absolute undisputed kings of early 2000s teen comedy, Jonah Hill instantly comes to mind as the lovable, hilariously self-deprecating sidekick. Through iconic, culturally defining blockbusters like Superbad and 21 Jump Street, he built a massive multi-million-dollar career almost entirely on his endearing, larger-than-life comedic physique. He was universally adored as the ultimate relatable funny guy. However, the 42-year-old actor eventually embarked on a profoundly dramatic, incredibly rigorous physical and mental reinvention that has completely obliterated his former recognizable persona, leaving fans and the international paparazzi in absolute jaw-dropping disbelief. The spectacular metamorphosis began when he decided to fiercely prioritize his long-term health, completely shedding the massive weight he had previously gained for heavy dramatic roles. But this was not merely a physical diet, it was a total, aggressive overhaul of his entire identity. Swapping his familiar curly hair for a striking bleach-slicked back style, growing a sharp blonde beard, and covering his newly toned physique in an array of highly stylized tattoos, he practically transformed into an entirely different human being. Aided by top-tier nutritionists, elite personal trainers, and dedicated therapists, his evolution went far beyond the superficial Hollywood standard. Jonah Hill stands today as a magnificent, deeply inspiring symbol of absolute personal reclamation. He spectacularly proves that an actor does not have to be permanently imprisoned by the comedic physical stereotypes that originally built their empire. His breathtaking, highly dedicated journey from a typecast comedic relief to a sleek, fiercely confident, and entirely unrecognizable leading man powerfully demonstrates that absolute, unwavering commitment can beautifully rewrite even the most deeply entrenched Hollywood narrative. Axl Rose. If you rewind to the absolute blistering epicenter of 1980s stadium rock, Axl Rose was the undisputed, untamed god of the global music scene. As the fiercely magnetic, hyper-energetic frontman of Guns N' Roses, he completely commanded massive, roaring arenas with his signature piercing vocal range and a wildly unpredictable, explosive stage presence. He was the ultimate untouchable symbol of dangerous, leather-clad rock and roll rebellion. Yet, the 64-year-old musical titan could not permanently outrun the crushing, relentless toll of time and an entire lifetime of severe, unapologetically chaotic excess, resulting in a profoundly startling physical evolution. When he eventually stepped back into the blinding glare of the modern spotlight, the fiercely loyal, global rock community was met with an absolutely jarring, deeply unexpected visual reality. The lean, wildly energetic provocateur had been entirely replaced by a profoundly weathered, heavily swollen figure. Relentless tabloid speculation aggressively pointed toward potential, heavily botched cosmetic interventions and intense facial fillers as the desperate culprits behind his drastically altered, fatigued features. The incredibly sharp, chiseled rock star visage that once defined a generation of heavy metal was violently erased, leaving behind an almost entirely unrecognizable facade that sparked endless, highly scrutinized debates across the internet. However, the truly breathtaking, profoundly fascinating climax of his turbulent journey is the magnificent, quiet resilience resting beneath the physical scars. Instead of retreating into permanent bitter exile, he fiercely continues to take the stage, proving his legendary vocal prowess remains completely unbroken. he has bravely confessed to undertaking immense, life-saving emotional work, pulling himself back from the absolute brink of destruction. Axl Rose stands today as a heavily battle-tested, deeply complex survivor of his own chaotic mythology. His staggering transformation spectacularly proves that while the brutal rock and roll lifestyle inevitably ravages the physical surface, true, monumental artistry and the human spirit can never be completely extinguished. Caitlyn Jenner. When you recall the absolute undisputed pinnacle of 20th century American athleticism, the name Jenner once represented the ultimate hyper-masculine ideal. As a breathtaking Olympic gold medalist who miraculously captured the hearts of an entire nation in 1976, the former decathlon champion projected a flawless, golden boy image that was proudly printed on millions of cereal boxes worldwide. For decades, this 76-year-old sports legend gracefully pivoted into a highly lucrative, heavily televised reality empire, becoming a central figure in the massive Kardashian dynasty. Yet behind the sprawling Calabasas mansions and the relentless, blinding flashes of the paparazzi, a profoundly complex, incredibly deep internal struggle regarding true identity was quietly, fiercely unfolding over an entire lifetime. The pristine, carefully constructed illusion of traditional masculinity, spectacularly transformed during a highly emotional, groundbreaking television interview in 2015. In a moment of absolute, awe-inspiring vulnerability that sent massive, unprecedented shockwaves across the entire globe, Jenner bravely shattered decades of agonizing secrecy to publicly embrace her true self as a woman. This breathtaking metamorphosis was not merely a physical evolution, but a monumental, culture-shifting declaration of authenticity. By adorning the iconic cover of Vanity Fair, Caitlyn Jenner instantly became a highly polarizing, yet fiercely undeniable global symbol for transgender visibility. She stands today as a magnificent, profoundly complex cultural figure, powerfully demonstrating that the absolute greatest, most courageous victory is never won in a packed Olympic stadium, but in the relentless, lifelong fight to finally step out of the shadows and live your undeniable truth. Priscilla Presley. If you trace the absolute zenith of rock and roll royalty, Priscilla Presley stands as the fiercely protective, impeccably glamorous matriarch of the ultimate American music dynasty. As the famous, strikingly beautiful bride of Elvis, she completely captured the global imagination, later evolving into a highly successful businesswoman and a prominent television star on the massive primetime hit Dallas. She possessed a timeless, porcelain beauty that was universally adored and heavily documented across decades of elite Hollywood premieres. However, the crushing, suffocating pressure to eternally maintain that flawless, pristine image in a notoriously unforgiving industry eventually drove the 80-year-old icon toward a profoundly terrifying, deeply catastrophic medical nightmare. The glittering illusion of her eternal youth was violently shattered when she fell victim to an incredibly dangerous, highly deceptive cosmetic practitioner. In what became one of the most horrifying, heavily publicized botched procedures in modern Hollywood history, she was shockingly injected with cheap industrial-grade silicone, a highly toxic substance typically reserved for greasing automotive machinery. The immediate, agonizing physical fallout was absolutely disastrous, leaving her once perfect, globally recognized features severely scarred by painful lumps and terrifying facial paralysis. Forced to endure a grueling labyrinth of corrective surgeries just to repair the catastrophic damage, her face was permanently, noticeably altered. Yet Priscilla Presley stands today as a magnificently resilient, profoundly brave survivor. By fearlessly, openly sharing her harrowing ordeal, she transformed her deeply tragic physical trauma into a staggering, powerful, cautionary tale, proving that the desperate, relentless pursuit of artificial perfection in Hollywood can frequently invite absolute, irreversible destruction. Shelley Duvall. When you examine the absolute mesmerizing eccentricity of 1970s and 80s cinema, Shelley Duvall was an undeniably unique, captivating presence. With her striking, wide-eyed beauty and incredibly raw, deeply authentic performances, she effortlessly commanded the silver screen in beloved classics like Popeye. However, it was her iconic, deeply haunting role as the terrified Wendy Torrance in Stanley Kubrick's The Shining that permanently etched her name into Hollywood history. Yet, behind the spectacular, critically acclaimed cinematic masterpiece, a profoundly terrifying, agonizingly real psychological toll was being exacted. The crushing, suffocating weight of the intense directorial demands, forcing her to endure relentless, hysterical crying for months on end, resulted in severe, deeply traumatic stress and actual physical hair loss, completely fracturing her spirit. The glittering illusion of her quirky stardom violently shattered when she abruptly vanished from the blinding Hollywood spotlight in 2002, retreating into a quiet, heavily guarded, reclusive life in rural Texas. For over a decade, the beloved actress was entirely missing from the public eye, until a highly controversial, deeply heartbreaking television appearance on Dr. Phil in 2016 sent absolute shockwaves across the globe. The fiercely loyal cinematic community was met with a profoundly jarring, unrecognizable visual reality. Her once vibrant, delicate features had been entirely weathered by time and severe, untreated mental health struggles. The incredibly exploitative broadcast showcased a deeply vulnerable, profoundly altered woman who bore absolutely no resemblance to the cinematic darling she once was. Despite the crushing, highly publicized tragedy of her later years, the ultimate breathtaking chapter of her legacy is her magnificent, undeniable artistic resilience. Before her deeply sorrowful passing at the age of 75 in 2024, she bravely stepped back in front of the camera one last time for a final, triumphant indie horror role. Shelley Duvall stands today as a profoundly tragic, deeply inspiring cultural icon. Her staggering, heartbreaking transformation serves as a monumental, chilling warning about the terrifying, consuming cost of absolute artistic sacrifice, proving that the Hollywood machine frequently destroys the very brilliance it seeks to capture. Bridget Fonda. If you trace the absolute, undeniable royalty of legendary Hollywood dynasties, Bridget Fonda was the fiercely talented, impeccably glamorous heir apparent. Armed with a breathtaking classic cinematic beauty and a phenomenal, magnetic on-screen presence, she completely dominated the 1990s box office. Through highly acclaimed, culture-defining blockbusters like Single White Female and Quentin Tarantino's Jackie Brown, she established a magnificent, multi-million-dollar career, universally celebrated as one of the most fiercely sought-after leading ladies on the planet. She possessed an effortless golden aura that seemed destined to keep her permanently entrenched at the absolute zenith of elite global superstardom. However, the 62-year-old actress eventually made a profoundly shocking, incredibly rare decision that would permanently alter her public trajectory. At the absolute height of her breathtaking reign, she completely walked away. Following a life-altering marriage to a prominent composer and the quiet birth of her son, the glittering illusion of her endless Hollywood trajectory was entirely abandoned. She traded the fiercely competitive, heavily scrutinized red carpets for a completely private, fiercely protected civilian existence. For nearly 2 decades, she successfully vanished into absolute anonymity until relentless paparazzi lenses finally captured her navigating everyday life. The immediate, explosive public reaction was one of absolute, paralyzing shock. The once glamorous, fiercely styled starlet had evolved into a completely unrecognizable, natural woman, fully embracing the organic, unedited reality of aging and weight fluctuation, entirely free from the surgeon's knife. The brutal, unforgiving tabloid culture aggressively rushed to dissect her altered, everyday appearance, viciously attempting to shame her for simply daring to age out of the blinding spotlight. Yet the most magnificent, deeply inspiring reality of her journey is her absolute, unbothered peace. Instead of frantically clinging to an impossible illusion of eternal youth, she firmly chose the profound, immeasurable wealth of a quiet family life. Bridget Fonda stands today as a spectacular, fiercely unbroken symbol of personal autonomy. Her breathtaking departure from the public eye powerfully demonstrates that true, enduring success is not measured by eternal physical perfection, but by the magnificent, undeniable freedom to simply walk away from the circus. Jennifer Grey. When you examine the absolute, undeniable peak of 1980s romantic cinema, Jennifer Grey was the universally cherished, undisputed sweetheart of the silver screen, bursting into the global consciousness as the fiercely independent, deeply relatable Frances Baby Houseman in the monumental blockbuster Dirty Dancing. She possessed an utterly captivating, highly unique on-screen magnetism. Her completely natural, distinctively charming features perfectly anchored the film's magnificent narrative, establishing a seemingly unstoppable, multi-million-dollar Hollywood trajectory. However, the 66-year-old actress eventually fell victim to the crushing, hypercritical pressures of an industry obsessed with a highly standardized, commercially flawless illusion of beauty, leading to one of the most tragic, instantly career-altering physical transformations in modern entertainment history. In a desperate, deeply regrettable attempt to conform to the relentless demands of the casting room, she elected to undergo a highly publicized rhinoplasty. The immediate, catastrophic fallout was absolutely unprecedented. The surgical alteration so drastically erased her signature, universally recognized features that she practically became completely invisible overnight. In a profoundly staggering Hollywood moment, even her closest A-list colleagues failed to recognize her at elite industry events. The very cosmetic procedure intended to brilliantly elevate her cinematic presence violently derailed it, abruptly exiling her from the blinding high-definition spotlight and severely limiting her once boundless professional opportunities. Yet, the truly breathtaking climax of her incredibly complex narrative arc is her spectacular, quiet resilience. Instead of allowing a single surgical misstep to permanently destroy her spirit, Grey fiercely fought her way back into the public eye, triumphantly reclaiming the stage to win a massive reality dance competition and beautifully redefine her legacy. Jennifer Grey stands today as a profoundly inspiring, deeply resilient survivor of Hollywood's toxic perfectionism. Her staggering, highly emotional journey spectacularly proves that true, enduring identity and raw talent absolutely transcend the fragile, ever-changing surface of physical appearance. Kelly McGillis. If you look back at the absolute adrenaline-fueled zenith of 1980s high-stakes blockbusters, Kelly McGillis was an untouchable, fiercely intelligent cinematic icon. as the brilliantly commanding, strikingly beautiful astrophysicist Charlie in the legendary billion-dollar phenomenon Top Gun. She completely captivated international audiences, sharing a breathtaking, electrifying on-screen dynamic with Tom Cruise. She possessed an effortless, sophisticated allure that perfectly balanced the hyper-masculine, jet-fueled energy of the era. However, as the decades passed and the highly anticipated sequel finally materialized, the 68-year-old actress found herself at the absolute epicenter of a fiercely polarizing, deeply revealing conversation about Hollywood's terrifying, hypocritical double standards. When the blinding modern paparazzi lenses eventually caught up with her, the fiercely loyal global fan base was met with a profoundly organic, unedited visual reality, completely rejecting the frantic surgical scramble to artificially freeze the hands of time. Her appearance had naturally evolved. She boldly, fearlessly declared that she simply looked entirely age-appropriate, proudly embracing her natural weight and the inevitable, beautiful signs of aging. The deeply toxic, unforgiving entertainment machine, which frequently celebrates aging male action stars while aggressively marginalizing their female counterparts, immediately excluded her from the massive blockbuster continuation. The brutal, highly visible reality of her casting absence sparked an absolute wildfire of international debate regarding the crushing, impossible expectations placed upon older women in the industry. However, the most magnificent, deeply inspiring reality of her journey is her absolute, unyielding refusal to apologize for her authenticity. Instead of surrendering to the devastating artificial pressures of the cosmetic surgeon's knife, she is transformed into a spectacular, fiercely unbroken symbol of body positivity and radical self-acceptance. Kelly McGillis stands today as a profoundly powerful, highly dignified trailblazer. Her breathtaking, unapologetic evolution spectacularly proves that true, enduring cinematic grace is not found in a desperate, surgically stretched illusion of youth, but in the magnificent, undeniable courage to simply age in the light. Kathleen Turner. When you envision the absolute smoldering epicenter of 1980s Hollywood allure, Kathleen Turner was the undisputed, intoxicating siren of the silver screen. With her signature, deeply husky voice and commanding, breathtaking presence in timeless blockbusters like Body Heat and Romancing the Stone, she established a magnificent, multi-million-dollar empire as the ultimate cinematic sex symbol. She possessed a fierce, untouchable magnetism that completely captivated global audiences. However, the 71-year-old icon's glittering trajectory was violently interrupted by a profoundly terrifying, agonizingly real medical nightmare that would completely alter her famous silhouette. At the absolute height of her breathtaking career, Turner was struck with a devastating, crippling diagnosis of severe rheumatoid arthritis. The grueling, inescapable reality of her life-saving medical treatments, including intense chemotherapy and heavy steroid regimens, exacted a severe, uncontrollable physical toll. Her once celebrated, flawless figure underwent massive, highly visible weight fluctuations and intense facial swelling. The brutal, unforgiving tabloid culture immediately launched a vicious, hypercritical assault, ruthlessly spreading devastating, entirely false rumors of severe alcoholism to explain her drastically altered appearance. The very industry that once worshipped her sultry image completely turned its back, aggressively marginalizing her for simply fighting to survive an invisible, agonizing disease. Yet, the most spectacular, awe-inspiring chapter of her legacy is her absolute, unyielding defiance. Instead of surrendering to the crushing artificial pressures of the cosmetic surgeon's knife to frantically reclaim an impossible illusion of youth, she fiercely prioritized her authentic health and well-being. Kathleen Turner stands today as a magnificent, profoundly resilient survivor. Her breathtaking journey spectacularly proves that true, enduring power and genuine beauty are not defined by a flawlessly preserved Hollywood facade, but by the magnificent, undeniable courage to walk through the fire and unapologetically embrace the physical marks of survival. Amanda Bynes. If you trace the absolute effervescent zenith of early 2000s teen comedy, Amanda Bynes was the universally adored, undisputed crown princess of youth television, bursting onto the screen with an incredibly rare, lightning in a bottle, comedic timing and massive hits like She's the Man and Easy A. She possessed an effortless, radiant charm that instantly captivated an entire generation. She was the quintessential bright-eyed child star with a seemingly limitless golden Hollywood future. However, the 40-year-old actress eventually fell victim to the crushing, suffocating pressures of unprecedented childhood fame, plunging into a deeply terrifying, highly publicized psychological abyss that would completely obliterate her recognizable persona. The pristine illusion of her wholesome, family-friendly empire violently shattered during a highly chaotic, deeply harrowing breakdown in 2013. The entire world watched in absolute paralyzing shock as her private, agonizing mental health battles manifested into severe legal issues, highly alarming behavior, and a deeply restrictive multi-year conservatorship. When she eventually re-emerged from the blinding, toxic glare of the paparazzi to attempt a quiet return to civilian life, the fiercely loyal public was met with an absolutely jarring, entirely unrecognizable visual reality. Her once familiar, girl next door features had been drastically altered by striking facial tattoos, unconventional piercings, and highly visible weight fluctuations. The brutal tabloid culture aggressively rushed to dissect her new appearance, but Bynes mounted a fiercely honest, deeply vulnerable defense. She bravely shattered the glossy Hollywood illusion, openly confessing to her fans that her physical transformation was the direct, agonizing result of severe clinical depression and her ongoing, grueling fight for mental stability. Amanda Bynes stands today as a profoundly complex, incredibly brave survivor of the ruthless child star machine. Her staggering, highly emotional metamorphosis serves as a monumental, chilling reminder that the terrifying, invisible battles of mental health frequently leave undeniable physical marks, powerfully proving the vital need for human empathy over superficial Hollywood judgment. We have just witnessed the profoundly heartbreaking and staggering visual realities of massive cultural titans who completely lost their famous reflections. Their incredibly dramatic physical evolutions force us to aggressively confront the deeply toxic, hypocritical nature of fame. Now, I want to turn this intense, highly polarizing conversation over to you. Is the brutal, hypercritical entertainment machine ultimately to blame for pushing these vulnerable stars toward desperate, destructive surgeries? Or is the relentless public demand for eternal youth the true monster in this narrative? Where exactly do we draw the line between celebrating natural aging and punishing artificial perfection? I need you to ignite a fierce, passionate debate in the comments section below. Hit that like button, subscribe for more shocking truths, and keep watching American Icon Stories.